Hey guys, it's me again, your friendly neighborhood costume man. I'm in one of those ruts where I feel like I do nothing but yell at whatever new Spider-Man suit is coming out, so I figured I'd actually do something useful for a change. Today, I'm going to be walking you through making your very own Spider-Man 2099 costume. This tutorial will include all sorts of things like fabrics, pattern making, and sewing. I'll try to guide you as much as I can through most of these different aspects of Spider-Man suit making, but I can't hold your hand through everything. So you might have to look up additional tutorials if you're a beginner to suit making. But anyway, enough guff. Let's start with looking at Spider-Man 2099's suit. It's a mostly one-color costume with some red on top. By looking at this costume, I can tell you that we'll need about 2 to 3 yards of black or blue fabric, whichever color you prefer your 2099 to be. And then we'll need about 1 yard of red fabric. The reason I say 2 to 3 yards for the black/blue is because you really could make the suit with just 2 yards. But if you're a beginner, I recommend getting 3 so you have some room for error. I wouldn't say the same for the red fabric though, since 1 yard is more than enough. But where do you find your fabrics? Well, I recommend Etsy. There are so many kinds of spandex on Etsy, and it's as easy as looking up red spandex or blue spandex. And if you're worried about pricing, you can always go cheap and get some one color, no detail spandex. Or you can go expensive and pick up some Cavan Creations fabric. There are lots of options on Etsy, and it's where I buy most of my fabric. Anyway, what am I using for my costume? Well, I am using a dark blue velvet spandex with oil slick dots. I chose this fabric because I wanted something shiny and rich in detail. Something that could look black in the right lighting, but also look blue. The red spandex that I'm using was bought from Walmart's horrible fabric section. I have no other commentary on this, other than the fact that I miss Joann's. Anyway, that's all the fabric concerns. What about tools? What do you need to make this? Well, I'll tell you what I'm using as I go along. To get the important stuff out of the way, there's my sewing machine. I also own needles and a lot of thread. I used both hand sewing and machine sewing for this entire costume. And if you have a machine at home, I recommend you use it for this project. I get it, you may not know how to use Granny's old machine. Just look up a YouTube video about it if you don't know how to work it. Look up the brand and number. Or if you don't have one, you can hand sew your entire costume together. You could do that, but you would have to be registered as clinically insane afterwards. For me, sometimes it was easier to hand sew something, and other times it was easier to use the machine. I wouldn't advise you to stick to one method, because I think it's good to know how to do both. Okay, let's make the mask. When making anything with fabric, it is always useful to make patterns. You'll need large pieces of paper to plot out your suit and map out how much fabric you'll need for which part. I recommend going to a Blick store and buying a large newsprint sketchbook. These sketchbooks are packed with translucent paper, which is great for my lightboard, which I often use to transfer my designs to fabric. But if you can't get your hands on something like that, you can just tape together printer paper. Anyway, you'll need all that paper to draw out your mask and any other piece of your suit. But how do you draw out the mask? Well, there's a lot of ways you can do this. You can look up a full mask pattern online, or you can use my pattern. Take your paper and try to replicate this shape onto it. I've color-coded the measurements, and hopefully that makes it easier. Get your hands on a ruler. I recommend starting with the 6.5 and then the 8 inches on top of it, making a T shape. Then, extend 3 inches off the same vertical line you used before. Create a curve that comes down from the top of the 3 and meets the end of your 8. Then, at the end of your 6.5, draw a 7-inch line that starts on either side of your 8. Then, at both ends of the 7, draw 3-inch lines going down. Close off the shape. Now, draw a curved line that leads up to the other side of the 8, and close off the shape again. And with that, you've drawn out your mask. Now cut it out with a pair of scissors. Now get your fabric, fold it over itself so that you can see the back side, the side without any detail on it. Make sure the fold is the width of the mask pattern. Now take your pattern, place it on top of your fold, perfectly at the edge, and use a Sharpie to trace the pattern onto fabric. But if you're like me, you're not going to trace the pattern, you're just going to eyeball it and cut around the pattern with fabric scissors. And now, we shall use my pin cushion to hold the fabric into place for sewing. Here's how the mask looks after being ran through the sewing machine. Notice how the only lines are sewn up close to the chin and the back of the neck all the way up to the forehead. The bottom of the mask is left unsewn because that's where your head is going. If your mask looks baggy or wrinkly around the seams, you can always shorten it by running it through the machine again, making sure to follow the inside of your lines. This can smoothen out your mask if your seam lines are bumpy. Anyway, I want you to ignore something for me, that this mask is completely different from the one I'll be using from the rest of the video. Don't worry, I made this mask just to test if this pattern I made works, and it does. Just make sure your fabric is spandex and preferably 4-way stretch, because this mask could look weird on rigid fabric. Anyway, now for the red markings around the eyes. These will be cut out of red fabric, and you know what that means. Get your paper and draw out this shape. I kept my Spider-Man 2099 comics very close to me to make sure I was getting the drawing just right. I recommend lightly drawing with pen or pencil so that you can take multiple tries on each line. I would try to draw this shape about 6 inches tall so that it takes an appropriate amount of space on your mask. I can't teach you how to draw, but I can tell you that it's a matter of trial and error. If you keep at it, you will eventually draw something that you are happy with. Now, cut out the shape. Be sure to cut out that fat D shape in the center of your drawing too. You'll need it for later. Now take your cutout shape, leaving the D to the side, and lay it on some red fabric, folded like you folded the blue fabric before, accounting for the width of your pattern. In this case, the red eyepiece pattern. Now trace the shape onto the fabric with a pen or Sharpie. Once you've done this, pin the shape in place like so. Once it's fully secure, carefully cut it out with your fabric scissors. Once cut, remove all the pins and you should have 2 matching pieces. For this next section, I am using a foam mannequin head. I have put my sewn mask over it and I have started to pin on the red fabric so I can begin to hand sew them onto the mask. Now, if you're smarter than me, you might have thought of another, more efficient way to do this, which is machine sewing these pieces onto the unsewn mask before assembling it. Well, good for you. Anyway, the mask is all pinned up, and I spent about an hour's time sewing the pieces on as cleanly as I could, and then the mask was done. Mostly. Despite how cool the mask looks, there's one problem. I can't fucking see anything. I don't know about you, but I like using my eyes and I don't want to run into shit at Comic-Con. So we've got to make some lenses for the eyes. Nearly 2 a.m. in the morning, I'm working on this costume. Alright, let me show you something. This is the eyepiece that I kept from my 2099 pattern thing here. So, what I'm going to do is I took this, cut it out into some foam. Now, I'm going to cut out the inside of this foam piece here. There we go. Nice open shape now. I'm going to take my super glue, and I recommend wearing gloves because you don't want to get this shit on your skin and get cancer like I have. I'm definitely going to get cancer when I'm 60 because I fucking touched this shit with my bare hands so many times. Guys, just get some rubber gloves or something. Alright. And now I am going to press it on to the material. Sorry, I was just trying to make sure I get the best placement here so I can save some mesh for a future project maybe. And then I'm going to use some spare foam to smear the glue so that it's not just all over the damn thing. Alright, I'm going to wait for that to dry, and then I'm going to spray paint it black, and then we're going to glue that onto the mask. Lenses. in an old Dunkin' Donut box. About to hit it with the black plastic dip. Let's go. I want to be very light so I don't accidentally fill the mesh. Okay, I don't want to do any more than that. Okay, here we go. Looks dark enough to me, although on camera I'm not going to be able to see out of this mask unless I put mesh over it. So as much as I would like to keep it all fabric, I want to be able to see, unfortunately. So I think I'm gonna have to put the black lens on there. No. Dude, I'm getting glue all over the lens and myself. Now, some of you may say I ruined the mask, and while I slightly agree, there is something you can do to make these lenses blend in a little better. I simply took out a big Sharpie and shaded in the middle of the mask. Now you can debate about whether or not I made it worse. Honestly, with a couple of passes, I think it looks fine. But anyway, that's the mask. Let's get to making the rest of the costume, specifically the shirt. I'm going to start by showing you how to make the pattern pieces you'll need for the shirt. I recommend getting out your tightest long sleeve shirt. You'll be using this shirt for reference, as it will help you carry out your measurements onto your pattern piece. Lay your shirt out flat on top of your paper. You will now trace these lines outside of your shirt. Remove your shirt from the paper and complete the shape. You should now have a pattern piece that looks like this, which represents half of your torso. Now grab your shirt again, lay it out flat, and trace out your sleeve. Your final tracing should look something like this. Now double up that shape so that it becomes completely symmetrical. Your final tracing should look something like this. And with that, you have the two pattern pieces that you'll need to make the shirt. Get out your torso piece and prepare to stretch your creative muscles, because we're now going to begin drawing Miguel's Not Spider logo. Once again, I kept my Spider-Man 2099 comics very close to me, so I could make sure I replicated the logo as accurately as possible. Once again, I recommend drawing this out lightly and not getting too hung up on your mistakes. You can always adjust your lines with new ones. Look at my drawings, they aren't perfect. Anyway, once I had the version of the logo that I wanted, I went over it in black. Now it's time to cut out the base pieces of your shirt. Get out your blue fabric, fold it in half, accounting for the width of your torso piece. Lay out your torso piece onto the folded fabric and cut the shape out of your fabric. When done, you should have a piece of fabric shaped like this. After that, repeat this step so you have two. Now, for this next part, I used my light board to transfer the logo onto my red fabric. But I figure most of you at home don't have a light board, and that's fine. You'll just have to cut your logo from your paper and trace the cutout logo onto your fabric, which, as usual, should be folded in half, accounting for the width of your logo. Once fully traced, pin your logo into place and cut it out of the fabric. Once it's fully cut out, unpin the fabric and lay it across one of your blue torso pieces and pin it on. This will take a lot of pins, and it should. You'll need as many pins as you can spare to make sure that the fabric doesn't shift out of place when you're sewing these pieces together. Anyway, once that's done, take it over to your sewing machine and get hammering away. Or if you're hand sewing this, get your straitjacket ready. Sewing on massive chest logos can be major time wasters, since you have to delicately sew on this intricate shape. I've spent many hours of my life sewing on big logos, and while it isn't impossible, it's definitely a long process. So watch one of your favorite TV shows in the back while you work, or turn on one of your favorite YouTubers. Hopefully that's me, and you'll go to the live streaming category on my channel and watch one of my streams while you work. Anyway, once you've finished that up, we can move on to creating the arms. Take your sleeve piece from earlier, lay them out on your folded fabric, folded with the width of your sleeve in mind. Proceed to cut this sleeve shape out of the fabric. With that, you should have two blank sleeve pieces. Now get out your sleeve pattern again. You're going to be drawing the line that goes from the skull logo and out onto the arm. Now notice, when I was drawing the skull logo earlier, I drew out this little nub on top of the wing of the skull, I guess I'll call it. That nub will cleanly transition into this line we're drawing, given that we're properly lining it up. Anyway, get to drawing out that strip. Honestly, if you're attempting to follow this tutorial, I recommend plotting out these pieces together. And by that I mean, draw out your skull logo and then sketch out the sleeve strip as well, just so you have some continuity in between these two pieces. And while you're at it, get out a piece of paper and trace out your hand. Now draw an arrow ending for that strip and make sure it lines up with your sleeve strip. Your finished drawing should look something like this. Now get your sleeve pattern and cut the strip out of it. Now lay your paper strip on your red folded fabric and cut the shape of your strip out of your fabric. You should now have 2 strips. Now lay these strips on top of your blue sleeves and pin them in place. Now sew the pieces together. Once that's done, you can remove the pins. And by the way, you should be taking the pins out of everything that you've finished sewing, just so you know. You should now have every piece you need to assemble the shirt of your costume, and I'll show you how. Get your 2 shirt pieces and lay the blank one out flat. Now get the one with the logo sewn on and lay it on top so that you can see the backside. You will now make 2 stitches, one on each side of the neck. Now take these sewn together pieces and lay them out so that the side with the logo can lay flat. Now take your matching sleeve piece and lay it next to your pattern so that it fits with the logo. I make you do this just so you can see how the piece will look when it's sewn into place. Now, take the sleeve piece and flip it over like so, and sew along this edge. You can even pin this part in place if you need the stability. When that's done, it should look something like this. Now take this thing and flip it over so that you can see the blank side of the shirt. You're now going to do what you just did before the other side of the sleeve. So just sew along this line. After that's done, repeat this process to attach the other sleeve to your shirt pieces. Once that's done again, you'll be super close to completing your shirt. Just lay out your shirt like so, and sew along the edges of it, on both sides, starting at the waist and stopping at the mouth of your sleeve. And with that, your shirt should be completely sewn. Feel free to try it on and see how it looks. I won't, personally, because I have more work to do. That being said, let's make some pants. Making the pants is going to be super easy. The only difficult part is the size of this item. The pants have to cover the entire lower half of your body, meaning that they require a lot of fabric and a lot of paper to plot out the pattern. There's a couple of ways you could do this. Both of them start with taping together enough paper to get the length of the pants right. You'll need a sheet of paper long enough to stretch from your ankle to your belly button. For reference, this is what my completed pants pattern looks like. Let's get to figuring out how you can make this shape at home. What you could do is find yourself a pair of leggings that fit you, lay them out over your paper, and trace out the shape. Or lay out over the paper yourself and have someone trace out your leg. Then get up and complete the shape so that it looks something like this. This portion on top will make sure you have some extra coverage. In fact, I'd also add a little extra on top if you opted to trace out the leggings earlier. Anyway, the point is that the final tracing should look something like this. You're now going to cut that shape out of the paper. Now this is the part where whether or not you bought 2 or 3 yards of blue fabric is going to matter. This is normally how I would make my leggings. I get my fabric, fold it with the width of my pattern in mind, and cut the shape out. I do this twice so that I'll have 2 identical pieces. I then sew the pieces together along these lines. But doing that could be pretty wasteful if you don't have a lot of fabric. What I had to do for this costume, since I only bought 2 yards, was segment my pants into multiple parts so that I wouldn't waste as much fabric looking for a huge piece to cut the entirety of my pants out of. I would then take those segmented pieces and sew them together to create the final pieces. Then I would sew those together. That's how I made my pants. But anyway, that should wrap up your leggings. If you put them on, you might notice that it's a little loose around your midsection. This is why I use Velcro strips to keep the suit secure around my waist. It really is as simple as cutting out squares or rectangles of Velcro and pinning them on the outside rim of the leggings, and inside rim of your shirt. Once they're sewn on, they'll hold the suit together comfortably. We're in the home stretch.
And it's glove time. Remember that paper I asked you to trace your hand onto? You're going to want to get that paper again and cut the hand out of it. What you'll do now is lay your cutout hand over your fabric, trace it with Sharpie, and cut it out of the fabric. Then do the same thing again, except mirrored so that you have a right hand and a left hand. Once that's done, return to your paper glove and cut out the arrow. You will now use this arrow to make 2 red arrows out of the red fabric. You'll then take these arrows, pin them into place, and carefully sew them onto your blue hands. Then, you'll take these hands and pin them onto a rectangle of blue fabric, like so. Then, sew along the edges of the fabric and cut along the outside of your sewn lines. Turn them inside out and you'll have your completed gloves. I did a little something extra with mine though, and you could see it earlier when I was talking about Velcro. I have hand sewn my gloves onto the wrists of my costume to make sure that the arrows never get misaligned. That's a choice you can make too, unless you'd rather keep your gloves free, or you can install Velcro patches into your gloves so that you can have a little more security and take the gloves off fully. But anyway, let's get to making the boots. For this next part, you'll need a pair of water shoes to sew into the costume. So go online and get a pair of water shoes that fit you tight. You're now going to get out your own foot and lay it over a piece of paper. Trace it so that you get a shape like this. You will then cut out that shape, place it over the fabric, folded with the blah 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 blah. Do this twice, blah 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 blah. Got all that? Awesome. Now, you'll take one of these, fold it over itself, and sew along the edges. Do this for both pieces. And after you've done that, you'll have a bottomless boot. Now let's sew the shoes into them. Put on your bottomless boots, and then your water shoe. You're going to pin the edges of the boot into the fabric of the water shoe, and then hand sew them into place, so that the boot and the water shoe become one. Do it twice, and you'll have a pair. And with that, you have all the pieces of your Spider-Man 2099 costume. Or, at least you'll have the Day of the Dead costume that Miguel bought from the store. Unless you're making a Shattered Dimensions / Edge of Time Spider-Man 2099, or even basing your costume off the Insomniac design, your costume will be incomplete without Spider-Man 2099's signature cape, which Miguel adds onto the costume later. I bought a singular yard of reflective lilac fabric, and my plan is to paint a massive web onto it, cut it out, and sew it onto my costume. I did this by taking measure of the wingspan of my shirt, since that's where I'll be attaching the cape. Then, I began my design, creating a web as long as the wingspan of my costume. You can go shorter than I did. You don't have to make such a huge cape, but I wanted to, because I thought it would be more accurate to the original art. So, once the cape was painted out, I cut it out and began to sew it onto my costume, very carefully to make sure I didn't sew the sleeves of the costume together. Once it was sewn on, the costume was finished.
Wait. Sorry, I forgot something. I forgot to tell you about how to make Spider-Man 2099's forearm spikes. Damn things, I almost completely forgot about them. What I did was I cut out a piece of foam, and then I cut out 3 more. I then laid them over my red fabric, which was folded over itself so that I could make symmetrical pieces. I then traced them onto the fabric, I sewed over my tracings, and then I cut the pieces out of the fabric. I then inserted the foam strips into the fabric pieces I had assembled. Basically, these are sort of like socks that will house the foam strips, which I guess would be feet in this equation. I then hand sewed these little pieces onto the costume, and that's how I made the little forearm spike things. Now the costume is complete. Damn, I nearly left that part out. Okay, just roll the montage. Anyway, that's the end of the video. You'll have to forgive me if I sound a little tired, because these cosplay tutorial videos take a lot out of me. There's a whole lot of recording. There's a whole lot of gigabytes of storage that get used up on my various recording devices, on my computer storage devices. Basically, a lot of stuff goes into making a video like this, and I just really hope you guys appreciate it. I don't have a lot going on as of right now. I'm currently working on the next episode of my Spider-Man cartoon, because the first one is out. You can go check that out on my channel. It's called The Adventures of Spider-Man or whatever. I'm not sure what's next for the channel. Honestly, I'm in a bit of a burnout right now. If you guys have any suggestions, any costumes you would like to see me guide you through making in the future, please be sure to sound off in the comments, and maybe I'll fulfill your requests. That was all from me, and I'll see you next time.